10, 9, 8. Go for main engine start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Alrighty folks, it's time to continue with working on the fins, and this is going to be an advanced technique that you don't have to do, but it actually helps a little bit. And what that is one of the biggest problems with the rockets when they land is they will hit this fin and they will split either this way or straight ways or whatever, chip out, especially on sharp edges like that. And that is actually a problem that can be solved, and what I'm going to solve it with is this stuff here. And what this is this is carbon fiber strip, and this is made by Midwest, and it is the size is 0.034 by 0.121. They have different lengths of this stuff. Weight 0.101 grams, so it doesn't add a lot of weight, but it does add a lot of strength. What it does is it keeps this from flexing this way and that way, so it won't snap. So what we're going to do, I got to do a couple different things to actually utilize this material. It is carbon fiber, so it doesn't glue with normal plastic glue or type on. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually use an epoxy, and this is a 30-minute epoxy, a nice long slow time to set, so we can position everything we want. So what I'm going to do is I didn't chamfer this edge here because I want to actually put some carbon fiber on that side as well. So we're going to put it on the baseline or the trailing edge, and then the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just take this and line it up here, and then I'm just going to mark it here with a blue marker. Now to cut this stuff, it's kind of difficult. You can't really use an X-Acto knife. You can saw it, but what I like to do is use one of these cutters, but you got to make sure it's not a set of cutters you want to keep sharp, kind of junky ones. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut through this, but it won't cut all the way through. It'll actually just kind of crush it. So we're going to crush it and we're going to wiggle it, and then it'll break off. So it actually, you don't want to try to cut through it because this can go flying and hurt you. So you definitely just want to wiggle it and snap it off. So then what we're going to do is we're going to glue this to this edge here, and we've got it pretty well shaped. I do see that the fin is actually kind of warped a little bit when I sanded it. I must have rocked it. So I'll straighten that out a little bit, and then we'll be ready to glue it on. Okay, got that sanded down a bit so it isn't quite of a curve, so this lays as flat as possible. We don't want any stress on it. So now what we want to do is we definitely want to line it up to this edge here, and then if this overhangs, that's fine. We can sand that down after it's glued on. This material is about the right width for this balsa. It's a little bit wider, but that's okay. We'll sand that down when we sand the fin. So we also want to do this at this stage, so when we put the sanding sealer over this, it'll actually go over this as well, holding that in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix a little bit of epoxy glue here, and just make sure that the epoxy is in equal amounts. You don't need much of it, because a little goes a long ways. And epoxy can be a sticky mess, so just be prepared for that. If you have some nitrile gloves or something, that's not a bad idea. So now I've got the epoxy, 2 pieces of epoxy, and they're roughly the same size. This one's maybe a little bigger, so we'll just push that off to the side. There we go. That way we have absolutely equal amounts. And we're going to mix this. Now you can use 5-minute epoxy, but 5-minute epoxy I think dries too fast for this. This gives you time to slowly mix it, not add a lot of air bubbles, and a lot of working time. But make sure you mix it good, that way it completely cures. If you have too much of one side or the other, it'll take longer to cure. And if you have way too much of one and then the other, then it will never cure. So, okay. So now we're going to run a little bit of epoxy along the trailing edge of the fin. Just enough to coat it, don't need a whole lot. Okay, just enough to embed that carbon fiber. So now we're just going to take the carbon fiber, and one of the things I like to do is the edge that is going to be glued, I like to roughen it up, that way it grips a little bit better. So I got a 150 grit sandpaper here, and we're just going to rough the edge just so it has a little more bite. Okay, and we're going to place a better picture here for you on the edge of the fin. Again, like I said, this can be messy, so best to have a paper towel close by. Okay. Now, once you get it to where you want it, and so it's, like I said, not overhanging too much, we're going to just tape it in place. And for this, I like to use Tamiya tape. It's a paper tape. And it works a little better. It doesn't stick and leave residue like some of the other tapes. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to roll it over on this side here. Get it straightened and kind of squeeze it down. Push it in position. Do that a couple times here. And this doesn't, I mean, if there's a little bit of a gap here, it's not too much of a problem because that epoxy is thick enough that it'll cover that gap. So what we're going to do is we'll just leave this like this, make sure it's positioned where we want, and let that epoxy dry, and we'll move to the next fin. And by the time we're done with all the lower parts of the fins, we're ready to do the side. Should be held on just enough. So that'll reinforce it, and easy, cheap way to fix your rocket. Okay, well, I've got the some of the carbon fiber drying on the fins. We're going to move on now that the motor mount has dried overnight and it's fully cured. We're ready to install it, and the instructions are calling for putting a 1/2 inch strip of glue 3 1/4 inches in. So again, we're going to take our stick, a measuring tool, and our pencil here, or pen, either one. Okay, so we're going to measure 3 1/4 length in, 3 1/4. Okay, so now we need to make sure the markings are correct, and we're going in from the correct side, because if you make a mistake, you are not going to be able to really go back. So this is the rear end of the first tube, so that's what we want. Okay, again, we want a lot of glue to make that 1/2 inch ring, which means that we're actually, this line that we made, will have to go in and out a 1/2 inch from that to make sure it's getting in the right place. So let's move that out of the way. We're going to take our glue. Alrighty. Then we're going up to the line. And we're going to make a nice even smear of glue in there. And check it every so often, just look in there and make sure that it's getting in where you want it. Okay. Now, let me do a visual on what I've got. And I think I'm going to need just a little more glue. So you don't want a super ton of it because it'll actually warp the tube and put a crease in it, which is kind of a weird effect. But you do want enough that you can push the motor mount in and get it to glue well. Okay. So we are good to go on that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to push in the motor mount, and it says it's going to go push in and leave it's going to go inside the tube a 1/16 of an inch. So it'll be just a hair, and we can usually visualize that. Now one thing to watch out for is this hook. You don't want it lining up with the launch lug or the fins. So just pick a point where it's in between everything, and that way there won't be any interference problems. Okay, I can feel it. Okay, so we've got, we're going to just give it a little 1/16 of an inch, and then we're going to let it set, and then we're going to start putting some glue in to make a fillet around that piece right there. That'll be next. Okay, so we've got our engine mount in place, and we're going to put a ring of glue to make a fillet here, and we're just going to put it around the edge like so, and then we're going to smooth it with a earbud, a Q-tip. And there is a difference between Q-tip brand. I usually don't like to push certain brands, but I have used cut rate aftermarket cotton swabs, and they don't glue the swab to the stick, so you get all kinds of problems with the swab coming off. Q-tip does actually glue them to the stick, so just so you know, they are a better brand than most. And they're honestly not that expensive. You get 500 to 1,000 of them for a couple bucks. So we're going to continue around. Just make sure it gets in that crevice. Sometimes if the crevice is too much, if there's too much of a gap, it'll leak in there, which is okay. It'll eventually set up so you'll be able to get it to stick. You can see that part right there. It just keeps going underneath that rim. So there's a little bit of a gap there. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a cotton swab and I'm going to dip it in some water, and I'm just going to smooth it around just for neatness, and pushes it in the gap there. So we'll let that dry, and that will be mounted, ready to go. Okay, jumping around to a different step. I'm ready to put the two front tubes together. This is E3 and E4, and basically this coupler is going to glue them together permanently, and then I'll do the same for the rear permanently, and then the two sets of two will go together with the actual coupling unit, removable coupling unit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this fits smoothly. I've got my markings somewhere here. There we go. And that is E4. And I'm going to take my sandpaper as usual and get rid of that lip, just so we have a better coupling. And I'm going to sand the edge of this. That way we just don't get stuck as we're trying to glue, because we got to be pretty quick on it. So just test fitting it nice and smooth. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to line up these spirals just for just for looks, just so there. But that's what we're looking for. What we're going to do is we're going to smear glue on the inside here. And this one we want, again, a goodly amount to give it lubrication, because this is going to be a little harder to push together. So I'm going to take the tube and I'm going to, just on the edge here, I'm going to put some glue. Now, just so you know, if you guys want advanced techniques on this, anywhere I'm using this Titebond glue, you can use epoxy as well. So it's just a little harder to deal with because you got to keep mixing the epoxy. Okay, so we've got glue in there like so, and we're going to line up the spirals, and we're going to put it in there. This is kind of tough because you're making a longer rocket now. Okay, get those spirals locked up. Okay, make sure all the way around that it's doesn't have any large gap, so you don't want to be crooked. If you want to, you can take the rocket and put it on something flat and make sure that it's straight, or you can just sight down the edge of it to make sure it's fitting right. So we're going to set that aside to dry somewhere where there's no pressure on it, and move to the next step. And just so you know, I haven't put this two tubes on the lower end together yet, because I want to put the fins on first. The reason being is it's going to be a lot more handleable to put the fins on and use a tool to straighten the fins if I've only got the one tube. So we're going to leave this the way it is, and then attach the fins when we've got the fins ready. Okay, I'm going out of order again. The instructions, just so I can keep things going, so rocket build goes smoothly and quickly. While stuff's drying, I'm going to start working on the nose cone, and what I'm going to work on, there's a blow molded gap or seam across both sides here, mold line if you will, and it actually goes on the back of the cone as well. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, to make it look better and to make it fit better in the tube, I'm going to sand that down. So I'm going to use my rough sanding stick, the 150, and I'm going to sand it down and just make sure I move it around the cone. That way I don't get any flat spots. And then once that's done, I will take it, flip it over, do the smoother to smooth that out, and then eventually get down to about a 400 grit sandpaper to make the nose completely smooth for painting. And then, like I said, I will sand these little gaps here down as well. So that way it'll fit much better in the tube. We do need to test fit, like right now. You can see and you can hear that it's really tight. That's way too tight. The ejection charge isn't strong enough. It won't come off, and your parachute will not deploy. You don't want it too loose and too tight. So we want it looser than that. But if it was really loose, you could put a little piece of tape on here to make it a little thicker to make it fit tight. But that is way too tight. So hopefully when we sand it, it will take care of that problem. Okay, so I've sanded the cone and still fitting it. It's still a bit tight. So I can do one of two things. I can sand this down, or I can actually sand down the inside of this, which will be easier. And I can actually feel there is a lip in there still from their cutting process. So what I'll do is I'll just take some sandpaper and we'll just sand the inside of it. Get down that lip and get down some of the paper. And it sands really quick, so just be careful you don't sand too much. Just get sanded all the way around. Now you can see so much easier. So that'll be just about right. You do the test blowing on the other side of the tube and see, make sure it ejects, and make sure that works smoothly, because that is part of the recovery process and you don't want that to get screwed up. Now the other thing I've done here is I've sanded this here, which is the retainer for the recovery hook, and you have to punch this out. But before I did that, I actually sanded this area here as well. The reason being is with the mold line, it gets kind of sharp, and with having the recovery system around it, it can cut things, so you don't want to cut apart your recovery system. And then now we're going to pop this out, which should, sometimes it just pops out with a push of a pen, but this one's not going to work that way, so we're going to use a knife. And just be careful that you don't cut into this and put a slice into here and create a weak point. So there we go. Even if it means leaving some of the plastic, like I said, just don't make a cut mark in that unit right there. So now that's ready to go. It's all sanded, and we got a finished nose cone. Okay, time to move on to another part. I've got the fins with both the carbon fiber pieces being glued, so once those dry I can actually sand them down and get them ready to seal. I'm going to skip ahead and do the recovery system, and for this I need the this is the shock cord mount, and I need to trim that out to the size that they have. I said it was nice of them to give an extra piece of this. I know they try to cut corners and print it on the instructions sometimes, but this is a better way to do it. Plus, this harder cardboard might be an issue to get into smaller rockets, so that might be the other reason. Okay, so I've got that cut out. Now what I'm going to do is, since I don't want to use this rubber cord because it tends to break easily, especially when it's stretched, if a little bit of heat gets on it. When it's not stretched, it's not so bad, but when it's stretched and it gets heat, it just snaps. I mean, the heat of the ejection charge is going to be a real issue. Now, a rocket this long, by the time the ejection charge gets down to the nose cone and the parachute, it probably will be pretty cool, but still, better safe than sorry. So what I'm going to do is use this stuff here, and this is a nylon cord, and it's nylon, it's actually strips or tubes of the same kind of rubber material, but there's about 6 of them, 6 or 8 of them, and they're actually wrapped with nylon cord. So this is going to be a lot better, especially when it stretches. It's going to be stronger, and it'll take the heat a lot better. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually take it and match the length of the original cord, since they have that at a specific length. That way it actually will, the nose cone will have enough time to eject and slow down before pulling on this. So that's why they give you all this length. Never cut those short, because then you're going to have a problem. Okay, so we are about right there, and since we're going to tie knots, we'll cut it with a little bit of extra bit there. We're going to save this for later, like making masks for COVID-19 or something. So, okay. So, first thing I'm going to do is one of the ends I'm going to tie to this, and then what this is it's a snap swivel, but it's got a little ball bearing system in it, so it actually pivots really easy. That way the rocket won't, when it tries to spin, it'll allow it to spin instead of taking the cord and wrapping it up and putting undue stress on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie a knot on this one. So what we'll do is show you a little trick here. What we're going to do is we need to unfray these ends. So you can see they're kind of frayed there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a candle, and always use a candle, don't use a direct flame, and light the candle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put these towards the candle flame, and they'll actually melt the nylon and make a closed up end. You'll see it actually start to melt. You don't want to get too close that you set it on fire, of course, because it will burn, but you just want it to melt the end. And there we have a closed end. And we'll do the same on the other side. And always safety first when you're dealing with the flames. Make sure you blow it out completely. And that's not frayed. We can easily fold it in half. And put it through the loop that's on the snap swivel. Not the snap swivel itself, not this hook part, but the loop. And we're going to tie a double knot on here. Okay. And always do a double knot just to be sure. Okay. And pulling it tight. Now the other thing we're going to do to make sure that this doesn't come unbound or untied is I'm going to take a little bit of the white glue, or I should say the Tite Bond glue, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a toothpick and we're going to work it into the knot. Now we don't want a big blob of it because then it'll get crispy and it can actually work against us and make the nylon too crispy. But we're going to put it and work it into the knot. And then once we got enough of it down where, like I said, where it loops over itself and so forth, once we got that, we're going to take our fingers and we're just going to massage it into the knot. That way it doesn't get too much into the nylon and make it crispy and make it able to break. But that'll keep it from backing off. So that's what we do on that end, and now we're going to get ready for the other end. Okay, we're ready to put the shock cord mount together. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the string of nylon cord that we've made, and we are going to basically we're going to glue it in like so. Give you a better, tighter view here. And let's pre-bend this just to get it straight. So we got one bend, and then two bends. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to take some of the Tite Bond glue and we're going to put it on. Let's flip this around this way so the white end is towards us, and we're going to take some of the white glue and we're going to put it here. Enough to glue the paper and the actual cord, and then we'll take the cord and we're going to lay it right into the glue towards the front, towards the number one area there. Okay, then we're going to take and put some more glue on here. And we're not going to try to get it on the shock cord because we do want it to stretch a little bit here, and if you put too much on the cord, I found out that it will actually make it crispy and it can break right there. So we're just going to be gluing the paper. Okay, so now we're going to fold the number one over into this component here and pressing it down around that cord, and then we're going to bend it again. Now that we have pre-bent, makes it much easier. Okay, and using our fingers we're just going to crush and pinch this around that cord like so. That way we're making as thin as pocket as we can. Okay, so now we're going to make sure that we don't let that dry too much, because what we need to do is put it in the tube and we want it curved. So if we let it dry, it's going to be straight and it's going to be very hard to curve. So we're going to take our tube that we've made for the front nose. Make sure this is number 4. And we're going to put some glue on this side of the pocket here. So let's get ourselves some more glue. Okay. And we want a good spot of it here. Again, staying off of the cord itself. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to put this in about as far as we can stick our fingers in there. So we're going to place this on the finger and push it in as far as we can. That way it's out of the way of the actual nose cone. And then we're going to press it in against the tube. And this is why you need it flexible, so it actually fits the shape of the tube itself. Alrighty, once you got that, it sticks in there pretty quick. We're going to let that dry, and then we can give it a little pull test. Just yank it a little bit and make sure that it's tucked in there once that glue dries. And now we got our shock cord in, and this end is going to be for the parachute, which I like using in this size of tube, a nylon parachute, which already has another clip on it, so we just clip the 2 clips together. That way I can move the parachute from rocket to rocket. Makes it a lot easier, and having these hooks doesn't add any weight really that's going to compound anything. So we will have that all ready to go.